Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode. This is our third? How many times have we done this? Second?
Not enough.
Yeah. Walk-worthy Encore mashup. What are we calling it?
Encore. You just called it.
It's a very dumb name, but that's what we've been saying. So we are combining on this episode today. We are going to be talking about pornography. We felt like this is something that needs to be spoken to from both sides, men and women, and so we wanted to be able to talk about it in a well-rounded way, I guess. This is not just a men's issue. It's not just a women's issue. It's a human being issue.
We're also in a competition right now. You guys have to do like the hardest subjects possible. And so Wes and I have tackled some pretty tough ones recently and gotten some nice feedback. It's fun. But I think you guys are trying to one-up this. This was your idea. You're like, let's do something really easy.
Try to stay relevant, Scott. That's all.
Right. With the times.
I think they do it better. I don't think I want to do it anymore.
What do they do better?
Talk about hard subjects.
Oh, I know.
I think they do it better.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it anymore. I'm a preacher. I'm not a talk show host. I don't like it.
You're revealing some things.
I don't like it.
Who does like it? It's not a like.
I really like it.
I want to talk about this stuff. You do?
I do.
Oh,
like
okay.
it.
He likes it, I guess. I don't like it.
Scott can talk about all of it from now on.
I do like it. Yeah.
It's a monologue.
No, I don't like monologue. I don't. That's what a preacher is.
That's why I don't like this.
Yeah. He didn't like anybody else involved.
Everybody get out of the way.
Let
I got
me
something to say.
I don't want your feedback. I just got to say what I got to say.
Accept it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess let's jump into this. First of all, I will say this is not something that gets talked about a lot in the church world. I mean, yeah. Okay, I guess you guys would agree I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that this in particular is such a taboo topic, for lack of a better word? Why isn't it talked about more? Why is it seem to be like treated so differently?
Well, I don't know if the church is good about talking about sexuality in general, which this would be in the vein of that, but I don't know if we frame... There's not a lot of discussion about it, I think, because it is a difficult subject to tackle.
Mm-hmm. This was not on the notes. I didn't prep for this one, so...
Off the cuff, here we go.
Like human sexuality is like the most intimate thing. So it's not something you ever want to talk about or to share with people, and all of that, like the sexual orientation and people that deal with all of that. Like it's a... I don't know.
It's an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people because it's the most vulnerable thing possible. Then you add sin to it. Now there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like multiple layers. So then there's all this shame and embarrassment. It's a humiliating.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is the power of the devil in it, to isolate you in humiliation and secrecy and ruin your life.
Yeah, that portion of it. But like sex in general, you think about just bringing it up with your kids, like they're automatically, like this is really awkward. I just think it's like naturally this private thing. I don't know how else to describe it. So I think it's like, I don't want to talk about it with other people. But yeah.
Okay, well then let's talk about it with other people.
Oh, let's talk about other people. That's what I like to do. Wes is going to run.
Right. Okay, so just to give some context, what constitutes pornography?
I don't know what the definition of it
Todd,
is.
what's the definition?
Are we allowed to, is that an easy thing to...
I don't know if you should do it.
There's a definition.
I'm sure there's
You can't look up the definition?
Google is dangerous!
He knows what to do.
You could put definition
Go to
first.
Merriam-Webster.com.
Yeah.
There's a way to look it up.
I don't know what the definition is, but it would be like anything sexually explicit to provoke or entice somebody.
Well, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like exactly what it is. Yeah,
I hope
it's
so.
got to be
Fine,
close to
Scott.
that.
That's a good solution.
Wow, okay.
But then how far do you go with that? Because people use other things aside from what we would call just pornography to dip their toes into the water of, what do you want to say, excitement,
Pause, please.
Wow.
Printed or visual material containing the explicit, you said that, Scott, description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. Yours was better.
Oh, okay.
Yours was the better version of that.
That's too many big words in there.
A lot of words there. But
And
that's
I
what,
don't-
yeah, okay, so yeah.
Okay, so here's
Visual
the thing.
stimulation, I guess.
Yeah, I would say like the definition based on like society's definition is different. So you're talking about whatever, billboards or posters or
romance novels. How far can you go,
yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Like all of that.
That's a good point.
I would say definitely falls into that category. But when people talk about that definition, it really is referring to straight up nudity and sexual acts. I think is
right.
Like nobody's going to come to you and say, "Man, I have a pornography issue." Oh, what do you mean? Oh, I saw a swimsuit issue at the grocery store. Like, we don't think about that. But so I don't remember the initial question.
I do think,
yeah.
I do think that maybe for women it could be different though, because we are so emotional that there could be more emotional stimulation from things like that, like the novels and the picture of what you desire and how you long to be desired and things like that could become a more serious thing.
Right. So I suppose we do have pornography, like you said, as defined by culture, but then as Christians, right, that would come back to the heart of what pornography is doing, is intending you to lust after something, and there could be things that are not technically pornography that are causing the same reaction in your heart to lust after something that would still be sin.
For sure.
Yeah. So the actual issue at the heart of it from the Christian side is like what Jesus says about adultery is it's well, for a dude to lust after a woman, like you've already gone there. So we can do it, whether it's a real person or a picture, without ever taking it to that level. And I would say that's the issue. Like, it's not necessarily.
You're talking about lust, though.
Lust,
right?
I am.
Just different than pornography.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's in the same.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, it is. But
pornography plays to lust.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, yeah.
So I guess we're kind of getting into this question already, but what in a person, what is the motivation to look at pornography? What could cause them to be driven to that?
Well, this one there'll probably be crossover.
Yeah.
But there are things that are going to lean heavier to the male side, and there are things that are going to lean heavier to the women's side. In fact, I read an article recently where the pornography industry is intentionally creating pornography scenarios that are graphically sexual, but they play to, I guess, the women's emotions. They play to a scenario that would appeal to a woman's relational desire, so they know there's a whole clientele out there, where it used to be, what it was, like men just want to look at images, men want to watch these graphic things where there is no relational aspect, where now they're like, well, if we do this, we can draw people in. So obviously they know what they're doing, and they know what they're trying to accomplish. But why? Is that what you just asked?
Well, yeah. What's the motivation, or what?
So some of it's going to be a curiosity. I think in a younger person, a child, it's going to start with a curiosity. You hear stories, you hear kids at school talk, you hear, teenage tales of people committing sex acts at school, and you hear words you don't understand. You hear about instances that happen that you can't fully visualize. So I think it starts with a mere curiosity, because, sexuality is created by God. There is a curiosity. There is something compelling about it. And I also think that there is a natural sexual desire that happens, during puberty and beyond. So then that sexual desire builds in a person. And so it becomes a device. It becomes an outlet to provoke sexual desire, to manufacture images. Because if you're not with a sexual partner, at least it can come into that. I'm sure we'll talk about that, even if you are sexually active. But if someone is not a sexually active person, then something needs to provoke that mental image. Pornography fills that gap to overflowing. And so then it becomes about, I think, the body and the mind's physical desire for sexuality. So that pornography lights the fire, turns someone ablaze in lust, and it goes from there. But that's an answer but I'm speaking as a man,
right?
Well,
so that may be different.
I think the initial walk into pornography is the same. I mean, I was listening to some stuff and doing some research on that. It often starts with a curiosity or an accidental discovery of maybe a parent's stash or something, or a significant other is like, hey, let's do this to spice up the relationship.
Yeah.
But the thing with pornography is that it is so highly addictive that could be the beginning, a curiosity or something, and then it becomes an addiction that then you're just feeding an addiction.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that as far as the guy's side. I think you said a lot of good things, but and I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but it does become an escape, like a drug or another addiction would do, and there is, this idea of, well, I don't know, it's an escape from the world, and you draw up physical reactions, and it's, the same as we talk about all the time, like food or drugs could do.
Well, I would question if there's a stronger drug.
That's fair, yeah. Well, I would say every person's different, yeah, but yeah, I would imagine it would entice people a little bit different that have different leanings.
So what's interesting is the impact of pornography on the brain releases such a high amount of dopamine it reacts in the brain like a drug. And they would compare the brain, physically the brain of someone who is addicted to pornography with an alcoholic, and they're very similar. It actually shrinks your brain and has real neurological impacts on your brain, which was very interesting. So yes, it's legitimately like a drug. It reacts in your brain like that.
Yeah, well.
So why, maybe that's the answer. Why is it such a struggle? And do you think there's a difference between someone who has an addiction, because there might be somebody, maybe they're not at that level. Maybe they're, just dabbling or just, interested, and the difference between that, and then how does it kind of get from point A to point B?
Yeah.
I don't know what my question is.
No, I've always personally struggled with what addiction is. I don't know, because I've never felt personally like that this thing controls me, and I think that's what people talk about in addiction. Food would be mine, but that's a hard one because you have to eat every day. So I don't even know, but when people talk like any addiction, I don't actually know, because I do feel in my own mind, there's a temptation and a desire, but there's a step to walk away and go,
for you.
That's what I'm saying. I personally don't. But so I don't know where that line is. I don't know how to genuinely understand addiction in that sense, where it's this thing holds me and I cannot let go of it. I can see the desire to continually go back, certainly, but I don't know.
So she's asking why? Why?
Yeah, why is it something that is so addicting? Obviously, there's the brain aspect of it.
Well, and I'm not a scientist, but it's very easy to find research if people want to go and do that. But, but the high levels of dopamine that it does release in your brain, it releases an unnatural high, so much beyond what anything natural can produce. But the problem with it is that it tricks your brain and rewires your brain so that you actually need more to create the same high. So then people need either more access or more explicit content to be able to create that same high. So then you become more addicted to the high, and you continuously return to it. And sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's loneliness, or just a feeling of pleasure. There are a lot of different reasons that people go to it, but it creates an addiction that, I do think struggle is different than addiction. Some people just have a struggle with pornography, and other people are legitimately addicted to it, where they're thinking about, okay, when's the next time I'm going to do this? I'm going to leave this gathering and go look at it, or it's more of a controlling factor.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to say it. It's controlling your thoughts and your next actions in that, but that's good.
I got to think of how I want to ask this question. How does viewing pornography or an addiction to pornography change our view of who God is, or how is that? I don't know how to ask it.
Who God?
Yeah, or how, does a person have a certain view of God, and so they might be more susceptible to something like that, or what? Does that make sense, what I'm trying to ask? How, because this is a spiritual issue as well. We've talked about the physicality of it, the science of it, but there's a spiritual part of it. So what is that battle, I guess?
Well, so you're asking about God, and then you say, what is the...
there's a spirit... Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
I don't know how to word it.
Well, I think any addiction is a misappropriation of worship. We're worshiping something else other than the Lord, and Satan is attacking the very design of marriage and intimacy and using pornography to do it. And he promises something in true satanic fashion, promising something that is alluring and interesting and enticing to our flesh, but it never can deliver on the promise.
Right.
It's always a cheap substitute of what God has offered.
Yeah. So I don't know if this goes along with it or not. I'd say this, like I think Christians should see people as image bearers of God. And I do think, so something that's helped me understand it and be, to fight the temptation more is to realize that those are real people, you know, and it is very easy to dehumanize anybody on a television screen or a magazine, and to realize like these are legit image bearers of God. And now that I have a daughter, like you can say that that's somebody's daughter, like that's like, whoa, you know, that I don't know. I don't know. Everybody's going to have different motivations or, you know, reasons as to how to help them walk away. But in a spiritual sense too, you know, if everything's in it for my pleasure, then that person doesn't mean anything to me. Like I have no care or love for them. I think Christians should have more love for people in general as humanity, and to see them as image bearers of God, and to see that like that would be a reason to escape it.
So obviously, as with all sin, there's damage that is done to a person, to relationships, to the brain through these things. I guess let's speak to the single people first. Why does it matter to them? Like they're not in a relationship that, you know, they've committed to this person. Why should there be a fight against it, and what's the damage that can be done?
Go ahead if you got some.
Well, it would be almost, I mean, I'm trying to formulate some things in a row. It, as already has been said, it is going to change the very shape of who you are. It is going to change you from the inside out. It is going to... So if you have a desire to be a whole person, if you have a desire to have a godly relationship, if you have a desire to have a healthy marriage, if you have a hope to be satisfied in your intimacy with a person down the road, pornography is going to rip that apart in every possible way. And that will become, short of a healing miracle, which does happen, an absolute impossibility. It will ruin every hope you have. And so I think people look at it, they're single, they're a sexual being, they have a physical desire, they have an intimate desire, they have a relationship desire. That's fine, that's real. You cannot avoid that.
And good.
It's good. And I think the problem is they feel guilty for having that, like, the Bible would call it a fire, a passion. They, like, oh, this is something bad in me. That's not true.
Well, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think in order to realize the impact the negative impact that pornography can have on a person's sexuality, we need to understand like God's design for it, and that it isn't a bad thing.
Right.
So I guess if we could talk about that for a second, like what is God's design for sexuality within a marriage? What is that supposed to look like, and why does it matter to him?
Right. So you could even say then, I know you have something, but pornography is a misguided application of our sexuality.
That's a much simpler, better way to say it. Yeah. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. So, you know, the motivation for a single person. Okay, so what's the initial motivation? I mean, let's be honest. I want an intimate relationship with somebody. I want a fulfillment of sexual desire. I want an emotional tie, a spiritual tie. I want to be one flesh with this person. I want to experience that and know what that's like. I don't have that right now. I'm going to turn to pornography and go, this stimulates a part of that. This temporarily fulfills that. And we think that's, so this can fill the void until I find that person, and then this will fulfill it and that will go away. That is one of the number one lies people believe, because it is not an adequate substitute. It's not a substitute at all. It is like, man, so if your sexuality is a thirst, and I have a thirst, I have a hunger for this in my life, oh, well, pornography comes along. Well, here's a drink that will temporarily quench that thirst. That's not what it is. It's pouring poison into the actual drink that you will take in your marriage, and then you're drinking poison. You're like, how did this get here? Well, I put it here a long time ago. So without saying too much, like that, to speak to the single people, you are poisoning the water that you will drink later, because it doesn't separate. It's not like, oh, well, now I'll set this one down and drink the pure water of a marriage and sexuality. That does not happen. It's going into that.
When your brain is designed to bond to whatever it's stimulated by in that way, it's very interesting. But when you're viewing pornography, then you are actually bonding with something that's not even real. It's a two-dimensional fake image, and it makes it very difficult then to have that happen in real life, like you said, because your brain is so accustomed to this other type of stimulation that's not real.
So to point that out, just to use the Bible sometimes, do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? This is 1 Corinthians 6:15. Shall I then take away the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? May it never be. Or do you not know that one who joins himself or herself to a prostitute is one body with her, and the two shall become one flesh? So it's saying that same one flesh union. You made me think of that credit, but but that is exactly. It's not just something we're coming. The Bible says you're becoming one flesh with these things, and it is an impure union. And so when you become one flesh in marriage, that comes with you, and somehow that has to be torn apart and eradicated and healed and brought, and that's a big deal.
And that's part of the design of sexuality, God-given design, that is supposed to, I think of sex like a glue that holds a relationship together. It's meant to be in a healthy marriage. Sometimes, I mean, this goes into many places. It could be in an unhealthy relationship that's not married, but you're in a way bonding yourself to all kinds of sin and nastiness.
Yeah. I do want to say something. So I know we talked about what God created it to be. So of course within marriage, but there are people out there that will never be married. And so everything you said is true, Wes, but there are people going, well, who cares? I will never be married. I don't ever plan on it or whatever. Like, God's called me to a single life forever. That's cool. Like, that there are people that God uses certainly to be single for life. And so I think, I don't want to reiterate my same point, but to go back to the dehumanization of people, like there's a massive danger in that isolation. And so, I mean, the Bible talks about community and having people surrounded. And so, like, what that does, a pornography addiction for a single person, it creates this isolation of kind of always wanting to run away and to be by yourself, on top of the drug that you talked about, where, whatever gateway drug, where you want the next thing and the next high, and it takes it to levels of they can't even function, in certain things. And then now they're walking in the streets viewing people. And I'm not saying that every person that looks at porn is going to turn into a rapist. I'm not trying to say that, but it absolutely changes your view of humanity. And for whatever that is, whatever the image is to you, like, that becomes that. So if you are single and never going to be married, you're like, okay, I'll never have that. Understand, dude, it's a, like you said, it's a terribly empty poison. Like, there is no satisfaction in it, but even worse, like it creates this monster within you that, you'll never be satisfied. So I just want to say that to the single people, understanding like the dangers and what that can do for your view on your brothers and sisters in Christ, and then people that don't know the Lord. You just begin to view them differently. That could be a huge danger.
Yeah. Well, and even for yourself, there's a very strong correlation between frequent pornography viewing and anxiety and depression. So, single or not, that is a strong correlation. So, for your own mental health.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about anxiety and depression here.
I do want to talk about the poison that you were talking about. We talked about it's something that a single person is trying to protect for the future marriage and not poison that. But what is the poison that it puts into a marriage? What are the struggles that it can cause once you are in a marriage, whether it's a problem that someone had before coming into the marriage or something that is introduced later in the marriage? Maybe this should be two separate questions, but.
Well, it is so the Bible talks about, if we're talking specifically about marriage, it talks about in 1 Corinthians 7 that, the husband's body is under under the authority of the wife, and the wife's body is under the authority of the husband. It says something like this, and therefore do not deprive one another. And it talks about better to marry than to burn with passion, acknowledging the fact that there is a passion that burns between these two people. That's definitely a reference to sexuality, and it's talking about keep it in this lane, and it is the purest, it is the best, and that fire does not go out. That fire is kindled. That fire it is not just physical. It is emotional. It is mental. It is even a spiritual thing from the time of the Garden of Eden. So what pornography does, which is the absolute opposite of what its claim is to be, is it will say, well, pornography will add, it will stoke the fire, because some people, maybe there's a problem in their sexuality. Maybe there is a lack of intimacy. There's a lack of drive or desire or something for whatever reasons. It's a much larger conversation into that. But what pornography does is comes along and says, well, try pornography, and it will stoke the flames of your intimacy, and it will give you what you want together. It does the opposite of that. Right. It does the opposite. You become dissatisfied with one another. You become dissatisfied with how your intimacy looks. You become dissatisfied with the partner that you have. Your mental images are not met with your physical experience. You go emotionally numb. You are not. Sexuality is no longer an emotional bond. It's not a spiritual bond. It rips that out and makes it only a physical hunger. That it makes you a consumer, that you consume like a glutton all around. And there is never one person that fulfills that, where it is protected in this sacred space. So it robs the marriage of all of that, dampens the fire to the point where many people will say, I cannot perform sexually without pornography. And then now that's not, I need more and more and more and more. And so it actually does the opposite of that. And they become, if I don't know, maybe I'm inventing this term, sexually disabled because of what pornography has. I'm not talking about a natural physical problem. People have natural physical problems, different issue. But you can sexually disable yourself with pornography, and pornography said it was going to do the opposite.
Yeah, there's a lot within that. So the expectations too of watching something and just assuming that would happen in a relationship. I mean, I guess number one, it's very one-sided. You read that passage in Corinthians where it should be about the other person in that context.
Yeah.
So, the idea of pornography is really self-satisfaction, and so you turn that into the relationship where it's all about one side's satisfaction. So I would say generally that is, I don't want to stereotype everything, it's generally more of a guy's problem. I do think sometimes on the women's side, we talk about those romance novels. I would say it could be as equally as dangerous where people would read a romance novel and have this Prince Charming dude, and the guy is just not that cool, and so there can be. It's not the same sexually, but
her actual guy is not as cool as the fictional guy,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Or not as he doesn't pursue her in the same way,
right. And so the expectations are not met, and then there's damage in the relationship because of those things. So I don't know if that's necessarily. It's not related physically, but it is. It's kind of all the same in the sense of expectations.
So I also think the physical aspect of it. For the woman's side of it, is that a woman does desire to be passionately desired.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of pornographic material is catering to that. So it is even physical. I wish a man wanted me like that. I wish a man treated me like that. And it is a sexual way. It's not what they show to men necessarily in the same way, but they do show graphic sexuality, but it is much more, there's a plot line, there's a relationship and they're like, man, my husband does not have that desire for me. I don't command his attention in that way. And I think they do even cater to the physical in that way, to where they're like, and so then they watch it, they impose this expectation on him, and they're bored and empty.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is never mind. It both ways.
Yeah. And I will add too, I think, Aaron, you kind of mentioned this too with the fallout of it too. Even in like non-Christian studies, there's plenty of studies to show some of these dangers, what it does to relationship and mental health too, long term.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at a non-Christian article, and it said people that are frequent viewers of pornography are 2 times as likely to be divorced, which is a huge impact on the relationship.
Yeah.
That's not even that was from NPR, like not Christian, you know?
Yeah.
But I think like you said, the expectation that this is going to spice it up, it does the opposite, because God designed sexuality, and it does have an emotional and a spiritual element. Yeah. And if you try to make it just physical, it's going to fail. Pornography is not going to be the thing that spices it up. But we do have, people where in a marriage, they're not necessarily using it for that to spice it up. But you might have one party in the marriage or relationship that is addicted. One party's not viewing it, one party is, and that can have extreme detriment to the relationship. I think it can produce insecurity.
Huge.
Mm-hmm. Lots of disagreements and arguments. And then you have one person who's poisoned, their mind is poisoned, and one person who's not. And I don't know if you can really meet in the middle there sexually and have that be a good sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm. So without going on and on about this, I have heard it said, I think you could find things in the Bible, in Song of Solomon, stuff that do speak to this, but there's a phrase out there that the greatest sex organ is the mind. Like it's not, people make it the body. Like it's all about what someone's body looks like and what people's bodies do and how bodies are treated. What pornography does is cater to what the actual sex organ is, which is the mind. And so, you think it's about the body because it stimulates the body. No, it doesn't. It stimulates the mind. There's a physical reaction. Right. And so if that's the case, it's holding a mind hostage. And once the mind is polluted, everything else physically, every other part of sexuality is over with. It's over. The mind is the number one thing. All right, let me just read this here. In a 2004 testimony for the United States Senate, Dr. Jill Manning shared some interesting data regarding pornography and relationships. In her research, she found that 56% of divorce cases involved one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. Another source, the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, polled 350 divorce attorneys in 2003, where 2/3 of them reported that the internet played a significant role in the divorces, with excessive interest in online porn contributing to more than half of such cases. Yeah, so we're not just talking like crazy.
Right.
God knows what he's talking about when it comes to relationships and marriage and sexuality.
Yeah, so within that lane, what would you say to someone who maybe their spouse is battling a porn addiction, or a spouse, what should they do? Where do they start? What's their course of action?
So I'm going to speak from the male side. Okay. And I have seen, being a pastor, being a Christian, being a man, I have had extensive conversation with people about this. One of the number one problems is that they are not free to confess or to converse with their spouse about this. They know, because their wife is, if I ever find out, I will divorce you. If I ever find out, I'll never have sex with you again. You will never touch me again. Well, that forces them into a worse place of darkness. Secrecy is the playground of Satan. That's the prison of Satan. So it's hard. I don't negate the plight. Again, as a man, the woman can say whatever. I'm not a woman, but I don't speak to the plight of women. I understand that as best I can in my limited experience, but I know that it's hard. I know that it's demoralizing. I know that but to hold your husband hostage, to say, I caught you, and this is over with, and if I ever find it again, is to give Satan a loaded gun to hold to his head. And you cannot do that. You have to say, listen, I'm not leaving you. We got to battle this together. There are many things to say. I don't want to monologue, preacher, but that is one thing. You got to free that guy to go, listen, just come to me. We will work through it together. We're one flesh. We're married. I'm not leaving you. This is an attack on us. It's not you attacking me. So I want to help you fight this. Let the guy talk. Give the guy freedom to come forward and go, I fell.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, honesty is huge in that, and like you said, communication. So, when Jessica and I first got married, I was reading this book. It was kind of a big deal at the time. Every Man's Battle, and you guys probably are aware of it. And I asked her to read it because I just like, this is the battle that we face. I just wanted you to help understand this. Now, I want to say this. This is not to justify dudes that are like, well, whatever, man, it's just in me. This is just what I do. That's not the point. But it did help her understand a little bit, like, do you really think about this stuff all the time? Yeah, it's there. And so just, I don't know, to try to be understanding. Any marriage has to be forgiving and understanding to any of that. And I would hope you can do that on both sides, though, too. Like, whatever, like the guy's got to be forgiving and understanding for anything that might be as offensive, but it's weird because guys can compartmentalize and have nothing to do with the relationship. It's literally just like a physical escape, but it does not translate that way to a wife at all. And I understand that. Like, it's a breach of trust and all of that. So the guy's got to understand that side too, on the women's side of what that would mean to her.
Yeah, well, and I think here right now we're assuming that a man wants to be repentant. I mean, that's
okay. Sure, yeah, that is the assumption. That is the assumption.
And
many do not. Sure,
there are some that where I've talked to women, and this may be true also on the men's side with a woman who's addicted, that they don't see the harm in it. They don't care. Maybe they're not saved, and they don't want to even be repentant.
Yeah, right.
But I think as with any sin, this is a problem in our own heart and our sin nature, and it's really, really, because of sexual sin and because it's so damaging and so intimate and so personal, it's really easy to take that personally as though that is something that is wrong with me, or there must be some lack. There maybe that's a different thing, but that's not necessarily the motivation for pornography. It is sexuality gone awry. So trying to not take that personally and trying to understand and put this in the camp of this is a sin problem that has to be dealt with the Lord, even though it does have so many damaging and hurtful ramifications to it. I would say that the person who has the struggle or the addiction has to be motivated to want to change. You're never going to, if your spouse or your significant other is struggling with this, you're not going to nag them or manipulate them into changing it. They have to see this as a problem in their own heart, and they themselves have to be repentant. So I think, yes, the pornography is a problem, but it is a symptom of a heart issue that needs to be dealt with first. And that would be what I would be praying about or trying to come after.
Yeah, very good point.
So talking about all these things and how it can poison a marriage, maybe there's someone watching who has battled this in the past, or they're a young person, they're single, they're battling this. Is there hope for them, and how does the gospel speak to this person about that? And can they still have a godly, fulfilling marriage that is everything that God intended it to be, having this in their past or as something that they've battled?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe in hope. I think there's hope for everything. Like, we have to all realize we're all damaged and flawed in some way. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't put it as like the unpardonable sin or anything like that, where this is not forgivable. Christ can redeem anybody's life, but it's going to take work. Like, it isn't. Sometimes we think, once I confess or forgive. We always have, like, Christians that we minister to in prison, they still got to pay their time in prison, like, you still did the crime, you've got to go through this time. And so that's the same for us. Like, we still have repercussions of what that means, but if that motivation is to preach Christ out of it, maybe he can use you for other people that are struggling with it and talk about the other side. But we'll always have struggles in this earth. But I know I definitely believe in hope in Christ and redemption. And that, for sure, a marriage, I'm sure there are stories of it, specifically that we know of. So
it happens every day. It happens every day. There's massive hope. The gospel can make a person a new creation if they aren't already. If they are a new creation and they struggled, this is why it's important. People ask me sometimes, why do you preach the gospel all the time? Why do you say? And it's not like the whole message is the gospel, but I have said here before, and I say from the pulpit, like, a message without the gospel in it isn't really a message at all. It's a talk on morality. It's a talk on behavior. It's an intellectual talk about God, but it isn't a talk about the gospel. So it doesn't. And so why preach the gospel to believers? Because you have to be reminded that you are saved, that you are a new creation, that you are redeemed, that the power of the cross redeems us every day. Makes us a new creation. The Bible says transforms us by the renewing of our mind. every day. And so if you as a Christian have fallen, and there are many that do and have and are, that power to transform your mind is still there. And how does that happen? It comes through humble repentance. It comes through fellowship and accountability in the body of Christ. It comes from the healing, miraculous power of the Word of God, filling that void, washing our soul, and reminding us of the new creation that we are. And that, in turn, heals marriages. That raises marriages from the dead. I know people, of course I wouldn't name them, but I know people that have said to me, and it is said in the right heart and in the right terminology, but they have said, my sexual intimacy is better now than when I got married before I was in pornography. I got married, it was fine, I got pornography, it messed it up, and then we were healed of it. And what we have now is a greater treasure than what we've ever had before. So it's not that just like, oh yeah, we think it can happen. There are people that I could privately introduce other people to that could help them where they go, no, listen, we are the story. We are the miracle. So yes.
Yeah.
If someone is battling that, they maybe, our conversation is compelling them like, okay, I need help. What are the steps that they should take? And, I have another question after that, but what are the steps that they should take?
Yeah. So I think, well, if you're married, I would say start with that. Talk to your husband or wife about it. I'm not going to assume it's on one side or the other, but have that conversation. And there is a huge element of shame in this. I get it, but I do think I feel like I believe shame is meant to lead us to repentance, not to lead us to a shameful life. And I think the enemy can hold that over us and go, man, I'm this freak. I don't ever want to admit this to anybody. So I want to be careful how I say this. Like we don't want to shame people with it. Right. Yes, you're going to be ashamed in the moment of like, I've messed up and I need help. That's okay. But we don't want to shame you and go, oh, okay, I'm going to back up. But like when a lot of us grew up and like our first introduction to it, you talk to your parents about it or not, it's like, oh my gosh, why would you ever and you feel shamed for even having that desire.
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
That's what's wrong with you. And then you're like, whoa. And I grew up to think that like even those desires are a bad thing. I know we covered the other side of it. So yeah. So I just want to be careful to use that word shame. Like, yes, we want to repent and to turn towards Christ and to say, I need help, but not to be ashamed for a lifetime that this has happened. So have a conversation. I would start with your wife.
Or if you're
husband,
not married.
Or if you're not married, I would say, maybe you're in a community group. Maybe one of us. I don't know. Reach out to somebody that you can trust and have a good conversation with. And really, accountability of some fashion. There's many different avenues we could talk about on a personal level of what accountability is and how it would help. But
well, and I think too, understanding that you're not going to just by willpower alone fix this.
No.
This is a real sin problem, and you have to partner with the Holy Spirit to do that. Yeah. The Bible tells us that if we walk by the Spirit, we will not carry out the desires of the flesh. So understanding that this is a daily dependence on Christ to help you beat this. As with any sin, it's no different.
Yeah.
So it's not just, okay, I'm going to not do it today. You have to rely on the Lord to help you battle it.
I mean, in a statement, come into the light. Like, come out of the dark and come into the light. It's hard. You have to humble yourself to do it. If you're married, if you're not, if you're single, whatever, just come into the light. If that means, everything's got set. But you got to come out of the darkness. Satan will kill you there. Come out.
I think it's important to maybe speak to the church as a whole, who maybe they don't understand the struggle with this sin in particular. How can we be an integral part of helping people come into the light? And how should our reaction be to that? Because like you said, maybe you grew up in a church where, that was like, don't talk about that. And because people didn't know how to deal with it, how can we change that and be what God called us to be in that?
Wow. That's a big question. I would say, be open to conversation. If you don't struggle with that, like your sin is no better or worse than the other person's. And we do view people that way. Like if they struggle in a different way, then we shame them. Like, I can't believe you would ever think like that. I can't believe you would ever do that. And so I would say every person, I think this is part of what we're trying to do here in the bigger picture of both of these, is say we can actually have conversations. Let's be real about this and about our real struggles and be open. So on the other side is be willing to hear that from people and to go, oh, okay, maybe I don't understand it, but I want to empathize. I think that's the right word, with you on that struggle, because I have struggles of my own. I get sympathized.
I know, me too.
But I think it's what it is.
I mean, the church needs to take away the taboo from talking about sexuality, flat out. Like, and we're trying, like, without being, there's these other guys that are like, what are you, the sex guy now? Like, chill out. Like, so there's a it's like, there's one system that's like, sex is inappropriate to talk about. It's private. It's inappropriate. Okay, well, the Bible has a lot about, like, there's some uncomfortable things. Like, what are we talking about? Like, there's entire books written. I mean, Solomon's climbing trees and taking fruit and kissing navels. Like, what? Like, are we really going to look away from this? Right? Like, are we seriously going to? Well, I think it's a metaphor for. Shut your mouth. I mean, obviously, he's obsessed with this woman. Yeah. And this is an intimate sexual union, and there is nuance. It's done with dignity, but it's all there. Stop. It's like, it's all there. And so the church has done a terrible job of framing sexuality properly. They didn't frame it at all. So the world framed it for them. So then people go to the altar of marriage and they're freaked out. And it's like, what this is like, I've this bad, go have sex now, it's fine. What the heck are we doing? And so I think that needs to be framed, and we just need to talk about it, whether you're a Christian family, whether you're in a Christian marriage, whether you're about to raise some kids, or whether you're in a men's small group, a women's small group, whether you teach it. Look, this can be a part of the whole. We talk about everything else.
Or a parent to their children. I know, another topic for another day, but
yeah, it's just part of the conversation. It's not this, it doesn't have to be this awkward one-time sit-down crazy time. Just make it part of life. It's part of life. It's highly important. Yeah. And so, like you're saying, we're trying to do it. And as well as all the problems with it, just look, let's just come into the light. Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah, that's good. So if you're watching and you are battling something like this right now, or maybe you have a spouse that is, and you need support, you need to come into the light. I know all the people sitting at this table would be more than happy to hear from you. You can email encore@rockfenton.com. That obviously your identity will be kept private. This isn't like going to everybody or anything like that. But we want to be here for you. We want to care for you. We want to see you free and living the life that God has called you to. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Well, thanks for sitting down with us, guys, and helping us tackle the topic. We will see you next month or next week, whichever one you're tuning into. Don't take our word for it. Walk worthy.